Okay, now that we got our model in, we're ready to control which animation shows, or I should say, now that we have our actor in here, we're ready to control which animation shows based off of the state of the game, whether we're moving or not. And also, these last two lines where we adjusted the speed and started the loop, I meant to put those up here, just to keep it organized. That way all the human stuff is together. It's a much more sensible place to put it. So instead of just starting it, I'm going to move that to a task for the task manager to decide what to play. It'll still be just self.human.loop and then whichever animation we want to play, but I'm going to have the task manager decide which one. And I'll decide that based off of Boolean. Self.human.isWalking. And obviously, we could assign the Boolean right to our game object itself, but well, in this simple case, it's just going to be this one. But as games get larger, there's going to be more than one Boolean controlling it. So to help organize them, I like to just create a Boolean object assigned to this self.human object. Just add another attribute in there. So I'll start that with off at false. It's not walking to begin with. And there's one other thing that we'll need. It's built into the actor object. It's an actor. There's a whole lot of properties expecting the actor to have things like animations and have more than just the basic model features, just a 3D image. So there's a lot built into the actor. And to change is walking, well, we don't want to change based off the key press, because remember that key press is being checked every frame of the game. So if we tried to change it here and just switch the animation solely off the key press, then it would constantly try to change it, and we would only ever see the first frame of it. So we want it based off this Boolean. We'll change this Boolean off the key press, but we only actually want to change our animation when we change from idle from standing still to moving. So we also need a reference to determine which animation is playing, or if a particular animation is playing. So I'm going to tack it on to the human object again. Obviously, we could put it right on the game object itself, but as games get more complicated, we'll have lots of these, so it just makes more sense, at least to me, to attach it to the object that it goes with. And I'll just call this idle control. And we have something built into the actor called self.human.getAnimControl. So get the animation control, get animation control for our idle animation. And that's that way we can, there's a lot of things built into that we can check and see if our character, the one we need here is to see if that idle is playing. So that when we push the key and start moving, we want to know if the idle animation is playing and is walking is false. That way we can catch that transition from standing still to moving. Otherwise, the task manager is going to check every frame and just keep trying to reload the is walking animation. So we only want to do it on that transition. And then I'll hit Control D to duplicate that line and do the same thing for a walk control. Which obviously you could just call this in the condition. But this returns sort of an object, so there's a bunch of methods built in, so we need another is playing is the one we're going to use. So now we can set these conditions and decide if that's going to happen or not. And then decide which animation to play. So I'm going to create a new method. I'll come down here where there's some space. I'm going to add some white space at the bottom, because I don't like working at the bottom of a screen. I'm going to find a new method and call it choose animation. And this is something we're going to hand over to the task manager. So we want to, well, we're in object class notation, so obviously we want to refer to the self as the first thing, and we're giving it to the task manager, which means a task will be passed in, and the very last thing we do has to be continue that task. So we will return task.cont, the very last thing. And at this point, I'm going to jump back up in here, and this goes to the task manager, so I'm going to go ahead and add that now. So self.taskmanager.add self.chooseAnimation, and we have to give it a tag for background stuff. So even if we're not going to use the dictionary things created, we still have to give it a tag. And I always like to just match the name of the methods. Well, except I always do tags in Pascal case and methods in Camel case. Other than that, I always try to make those match. So just added it to the task manager with the method and the name of the tag to put in the dictionary on the other side. So now what this needs to check is if we are transitioning to walking or not. So if not self.human is walking. So if is walking is false, that means we're standing still, and not human.idle control. Whoops, I clicked off it. And not human self.human.idle control is plain, then we want to switch. So if we're not walking and the idle animation is not plain, then we'll call self.human.loop the idle animation. And same thing for our other one, and I want to make sure and be explicit, so instead of an else, I'm going to put an elif. So else if, that way I can make sure the condition is checked. Self.human.is walking. So else if we are walking, and not self.human.walk control is plain. So if we are walking and the walk animation is not plain, then we want to call self.human.loop on the walk animation. And we have to catch that transition, because if we just went with this Boolean, well, the Boolean is what's going to change from a key press. So it would change at every key press, which is every frame of the game, and it would restart the loop every time, so we would only ever see the first frame. So now we can change that Boolean, which we can do up here after we check the key presses. Well, if we're moving, that's either forward or backwards. So the easiest thing to check is just if our step is not 0. Because we set it up with a default of 0. And then if we're moving, the step size is going to be something that's not 0. So we can just check that. So if step does not equal 0 and not self.human.is walking. So I guess we need 2 parts here, because we only want to check the transition. If we were already walking, we don't want to change it. So if step is 1 or -1, and we are is walking is false, then we want to transition to walking. So at that point, we'll say self.human.isHuman is reassigned not self.isHuman. self.human.isWalking. So if the controls say move and the Boolean says not moving, then we transition to that Boolean. And I want to explicitly state the other way too. So if step is equal to 0 and self.human.isWalking, then we're going to change, then we want to not be walking. Self.human.isWalking equals false. I guess I could have put true here instead of the toggling. That might make more sense, because if the keys say key press says we're moving and the Boolean says we're not moving, well then we want our Boolean to say we are moving. Whoops. That should say is walking. So yeah, if we're moving but the Boolean says we're not, then we need to switch the Boolean. And if we're not moving and the Boolean says we are, then we want to set that Boolean back to false. And so if the Boolean is false and the idle animation is not playing, we start the idle animation. If the Boolean is true and the walk animation is not playing, then we start the walk animation. We don't want to restart it every frame, so we have to be careful and set up our condition to catch that change, catch only the transition between states and not just the state itself, because the state itself doesn't necessarily update every frame of the game. Let me see what this error is about. Apparently a typo while I was typing and talking at the same time. No, it looks like I just missed a colon at the end of the condition. Right there. So save that and give that another try. Alright, so we start off in the idle animation, which, remember, we turned off that default one. We commented out the just start looping, so that has to be coming from the task manager. And if I push the W key, oh, we walk. Although that speed looks a little fast for that step size. Could probably back that off a little. For the step size, that speed looked a little long, but it looked like he was starting and stopping. I'm going to try cutting that in half. Whoops. Give that another run. And just, testing and trying to find the right value. So if I turn, that looks a little bit better. Those steps seem to match the distance he's covering. Could probably slow it down a little more. I'm just going to go with that since this is a quick version. But yeah, whenever we bring the animation in, we want to make sure they line up. I should probably have a different backward walk animation, because that posture isn't exactly the same as the forward walk. But if we stop moving, he idles. If we start moving, he walks. So there's all our animations brought in for 2 and 3D. That's the basic idea for the quick starts. So yeah, I think now we're ready to start putting our objects together to use in the actual game writer object. Put the objects together and then create a method that we can use to add objects in, all the objects we need, into the file that's being written. So we'll get started on that in the next video. We'll see you then.